Good evening. So we will make a start now. So first of all, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Ellen Walkinshaw. I'm Director of Progression and Skills here at the college. And you'll see that I'm joined with four current students. One, Sophie, who's in the lower sixth and is on the Aspire programme at the moment, and the other three who were on the Aspire programme last year and are currently in the upper sixth. They will introduce themselves properly later on, and you'll have the opportunity later on to pose questions to them. So what we're going to talk about this evening, first of all, I'll give an overview of the Aspire programme. As I said, then you'll get to speak to some Aspire students. The students are going to have a kind of small debate, which is the kind of thing that we do in Aspire. So to give you a taste of types of things you might be doing, and you'll have a chance to ask them some questions. Really importantly, because I know at this stage in year 11, you'll all be thinking about what subjects you'd like to study. I'll give you some advice about subject choice to maybe help you make those decisions. And I'll talk about the next steps in terms of the Aspire programme and moving on from this evening. So what exactly is the Aspire programme? The Aspire programme is bespoke to Reigate College, so we've designed it ourselves, and it aims to give you all the help and advice you need on deciding what you want to do after you've left college. So most of the people on the Aspire programme go on to apply to university, and I'll talk about some of the destinations of those Aspire students in a moment, but people also consider apprenticeships, particularly degree apprenticeships. So the Aspire programme is 1 hour a week on your timetable with a dedicated tutor to really help give you that extra advice that you need to make those successful applications. You're only actually at college for quite a short amount of time, so it's well under 2 years you're actually with us. So you need to start thinking about what you'd like to do pretty much as soon as you join us. You may have heard already of something called the Extended Project Qualification, or EPQ, and that's something that if you choose to, you can take as part of the Aspire programme, and we'll also talk about that more this evening too. So, now, in fact, so what is an EPQ? So, as I said, it stands for Extended Project Qualification. You'll hear from Bertie, who's actually completed an EPQ himself. You can choose the topic that you research, as long as it doesn't overlap with one of your A-level or BTEC qualifications. You can pretty much choose anything to research. Most students choose their final product to be an extended essay of around 5,000 words. But sometimes students choose to complete an artifact. So, for instance, if you were doing something creative alongside your geography, politics or economics courses, you might like to produce a piece of artwork, or people have done things like producing a garment that's made to a certain budget with entirely recycled materials. But most people, particularly studying essay-based subjects, as most of you on the call will be, choose to actually write an extended essay for their EPQ. The qualification counts as half an A-level, and universities really value it because it does demonstrate that genuine academic interest, and probably most importantly, the ability to study much more independently than even your A-level studies give you. Some universities value the EPQ so much that they'll actually make you an alternative offer if you achieve a high grade in your EPQ. So, for instance, Exeter, Bath, Southampton, Birmingham, Nottingham, they're examples of universities that, at least for some of their courses, offer lower offers for EPQ. It might be the case that the standard offer for a course is 3 A's, but if you've got a high grade in your EPQ, you would be able to still take up your place with AAB. So it is a really valued qualification, and most importantly, it gives you a chance to really develop some useful skills for university or employment in terms of working more independently. So some examples of titles that people have chosen in the past. So these are the first 5 there are dissertations. I chose them from the huge array of titles that students pick because I thought they'd be of interest to people interested in perhaps studying economics, politics or geography. So we had should media literacy be taught in schools? How successful is the BBC in maintaining impartiality? So a couple of years ago, there were some particular kind of prominent cases where the BBC and particular personalities presenting on the BBC were called to account for not maintaining impartiality. Looking at a country's economic status and their level of oral hygiene. So that was somebody that was considering dentistry, but I was also interested in economics. So they're doing biology, chemistry and economics as a third subject. something about fast fashion, and again, kind of more of an international relations type question about North Korea. However, as I said, you may also want to complete an artifact, and I won't dwell on those because they're probably more kind of likely to be linked to people that study either film studies in one case, or this student was going on to study architecture and studying product design. But those are just some of the things that you could do to give you a flavour of the types of things you could explore. So in terms of getting a place on the Aspire programme, if you've got older brothers or sisters that have been to college, you might have heard from them that you have to have a certain GCSE score to join the programme. We've actually decided that all students could benefit from the Aspire programme, so there's no longer a minimum GCSE score requirement to join the programme. However, we do look at the GCSE scores you've got and use that to put you in different groups. So basically, if you have an average GCSE score of around 7 or above, so I'm sure you can work that out from kind of your predicted grades that you've got at the moment, whether that's likely to be the case for you or not, then you would have the opportunity to complete your EPQ in the first year. Okay. If you have an EPQ, so GCSE score that's a bit lower, you could research one in your lower 6th year, but actually complete the EPQ in the upper 6th year. Okay, so that gives you the chance to, if you've got that GCSE score that's still really good, but not quite top GCSEs like 7s, 8s and 9s and everything, it gives you the chance to make sure that you're able to cope with your A-level or BTEC studies here before taking on kind of what's the equivalent, as we said, of an extra A-level, half A-level on top of those studies. As you'll find out today, you do not have to complete an EPQ as part of the Aspire programme. It may be, as is the case with our panellists or some of our panellists today, that you're doing 4 A-levels. And although we don't completely rule out an EPQ on top of 4 A-levels, for the vast majority of students, we would advise against it, just in terms of the workload. Or it might be that actually you have a lot of other things going on outside of college. Maybe you're applying for, courses that require you to have a large amount of work experience, and that's taking up a lot of time. Or maybe you play a lot of sports, or you have caring responsibilities or part-time jobs outside of college that mean you just haven't got the time to take on that extra qualification, because you really do need to commit to it. It's worth half an A-level, so therefore the amount of time you spend on it will need to be the equivalent to half an A-level. You don't need to go away and do anything about adding Aspire to your programme at this stage. It's not something that we add at the moment. When you come for your interview that you'll have post-GCSE results before you start with us, that's the point at which we'll discuss it with you, and you'll have the opportunity to enrol on it then. So you don't need to do anything now. I just realised this says if you qualify there, we just need to update the PowerPoint so that there's not a qualification requirement for Aspire anymore. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A function on Zoom. It might be though that I answer, or the panel answer, some of the questions you've got, so maybe hold off adding them to the Q&A for a little bit, because we might actually answer your question, but there will be time for questions later. So just a little bit about the impact of Aspire, because obviously the college invests lots in it in terms of staffing, and it's an investment of students' time. So just why do we do it? What evidence do we have to suggest that it's helpful? Well, we get feedback from our students that who say it's helpful, and hopefully you'll hear from the current students about what they have got out of it. But it's grown and grown. So in 2017 and 2018, when I started my role, hit this role at college, we had 263 students on the programme, and that's now gone up to 680. And in that time, I mean, other factors will obviously have played into this as well, but the percentage of students that are applying to university who get offers from the Russell Group, which is a group of 24 competitive universities, research-focused universities, has gone from 21 to 37%. We've also had great success there with Oxbridge offers and offers to study medicine, vet science and dentistry. However, as I said, not all Aspire students will want to go on to university. You can see some of the apprenticeships that students have gone on to in recent years. And Russell groups are not the be-all and end-all of universities either. So there's a group called the Sutton 30, which is the Russell Group universities, but a further 6 other highly competitive universities. And if you look at the percentage of students that apply to university to go on to those universities, it rises to just over 50%. And it might be actually that if there's a particularly very specialist course you want to do, it's not best offered at a Russell Group university anyway. There might be a case for you not looking at those universities. So yeah, we do feel that Aspire program has a big impact, and there are other kind of like less measurable impacts it has. We feel in terms of developing students' confidence, their honesty skills, and kind of making their ability to make really informed decisions about what they want to do in the future. So a little bit more detail about destination. So for the 3 subjects that you might be interested in studying, and you might actually be interested in studying all 3 of those, or maybe just one of them, or a combination of 2 of them. It's really interesting to see that for economics and politics, for economics, for instance, there were 109 students that studied A-level economics leaving in 2025, and 30 of those went on to actually study an economics degree, and 17, a further 17, something very closely related to economics in finance or accounting. Likewise with politics, you get a very large number of students going on to study politics or international relations. And with geography, yes, there are some more business students, but again, lots going on to study geography, but also a whole range of subjects. Geography as a subject goes very well with science subjects. So particularly biology, if you're interested in something like environmental science, but it pairs well with lots of other subjects as well. So hopefully that's interesting for you to see and think about kind of where your politics, geography, or economics A-level might take you. So the best bit of this evening really is for you all to get to meet some current upper 6th students. So I did say I was going to go left to right, but I'm actually going to go because I think it'll be more make more sense for the audience if we go in the order in which your names are on the screen. So I just asked these students to unmute themselves and introduce themselves, say a little bit about what they're studying here at college, what school they went to, and what plans they've got for after college. So first of all, Zach.
Hi, I'm Zach. I study history, politics, philosophy, and music technology. I went to Woodcote High School in Coulston, and I'm looking to study history and politics at university.
Okay, and Aaron?
Hi, I'm Aaron. I went to the Beacon School and I study maths, further maths, computer science, and economics. And I hope to study economics at university next year.
Bertie?
Hi, my name is Bertie. I went to the Beacon School in Banstead. I study maths, geography, and economics, and hope to study global sustainable development at uni.
Okay, and Bertie's our one person here that did do an EPQ, so he can answer questions about that later. And finally, Sophie?
Hi, I'm Sophie. I used to go to St. Bede's. I'm studying maths, further maths, politics, and economics, and I'm thinking of applying for PPE or economics next year.
Okay, fantastic. That was a bit like University Challenge, if any of you watch that. So yeah, as I said, if you've got questions, you can pop them in the Q&A and we will answer them, but at the end. So you might want to sort of hold your time before you actually pop them in there, because we might answer some of them. However, we are going to move on to our debate now. As I said, we have this sort of very mini debate, and we encourage you to develop your oracy skills in all sorts of ways during the Aspire pathway. So it might be reading an article and just telling the rest of the class about it. And we do try and find time for some mini debates as well. So when I chose this topic, well, first of all, we debated this topic this time last year, and it was very relevant then. And then I thought I should find a new topic to debate for this year, but I thought, no, actually we'll stick with this one because it goes so well with geography, economics, and politics. So we decided that last week, and then obviously with events over the weekend, it's become even more relevant. So we want, first of all, before we let our students tell you what they think and have a little bit of a debate, to hear what you think as an audience. So we're going to launch a poll that you'll see on your screen. So can you just take a moment to answer whether you agree or disagree with that motion there, that the UK government should prioritise defence spending over spending on foreign aid? We'll do the poll again at the end of the debate to see if, when you've had a bit more time to think about it and you've heard some arguments from each side, you've changed your mind and we'll see overall if the motion gets carried or not. So we're just, I can see lots of you putting in your answers, what you think, and we'll just give it a little bit longer to for you all to have your say. And agree are just slightly, well, quite a bit ahead at the moment, 59% to 41%. Okay, and I think looks like most people have voted now. Well, they're still coming in. Okay, so we've got, let's call that, so we've got 59% agreeing with the motion and 41% disagreeing with it as we are just about to kind of launch into the debate. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, to the side that's speaking for the motion. So that's Aaron and Sophie. They're going to put forward their points that they would like to share with you.
We are in favour of prioritising defence spending over spending on foreign aid due to the government's primary duty of protecting UK citizens during these times of increased global conflicts. Currently, the UK Ministry of Defence is severely underfunded, needing a payment of £28 billion to meet existing costs over the next 4 years. This has been acknowledged by the current government, where Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to increase defence spending to 2.5% by April 2027. This will assist the UK in upholding NATO relations and US relations for the current events going on right now. Furthermore, this plan to reduce overseas spending from 0.5% of gross national income to 0.3% gross national income will provide the UK government the funding they need to support the refugees from current war-torn countries such as Ukraine who have migrated to the UK. Therefore, I believe increasing defence spending will be necessary for the UK to uphold national security.
Okay, fantastic. And speaking against the motion, please.
We oppose the prioritisation of spending on defence over foreign aid due to the hazards of instability which could arise from foreign aid cuts in the developing world. We argue as a developed country, the UK has a moral obligation to support those who are less developed, promoting sustainable economic growth abroad. In the modern world, the UK no longer relies on its hard power, rather its soft power is greatly respected throughout its contributions in developing countries through foreign aid. This means that foreign aid is only getting more important to preserve the position and respect of the UK on the global stage. Furthermore, we support the view that foreign aid promotes the provision of merit goods, such as education and healthcare, in economies which are in dire need of them, like those in sub-Saharan Africa. Therefore, we argue that aid can tackle the root causes of instability, such as poor governance, poverty, or a lack of resources, and even suggest increased spending on foreign aid will lead to increased global stability, preserving the UK's influence in a rapidly changing global scene, and reduce the need for increased spending on defence in the future, freeing up public funds for spending elsewhere in the economy.
Fantastic. Now, the panel are going to ask questions, each side's going to ask questions here in the room, but at home you can also join in. So if you've got questions that you'd like to ask or points that you'd just like to raise for either side of the debate, can you pop them in the chat? So don't use the Q&A, use the chat function for this part of the evening. And if you can say, if you've got a question, just say whether it's a question for the for side or against side. Or if you've just, maybe there's just a point that you'd like to raise that, your point of view with regards to this, and we can share some of those. So use the chat function to add anything you'd like. But I'll hand back over to the side speaking in favour of the motion. What questions do they have that they'd like to challenge the other Bertie and Zach on?
We'd like to ask that, do you not think that the primary duty of the UK government should be to prioritise what its own citizens want, especially as they're using British taxpayer money? Like, it should be directed towards British needs?
Well, I would argue that for defending the British people, simply spending needlessly on defence is no longer a priority, especially in the modern world where, the UK is a nuclear armed power. So we don't really need to be throwing away money for conventional forces like, troops and ships and whatnot. Instead, foreign aid will help the UK's soft power, which is kind of the primary part of UK power in the modern world, especially since the UK is no longer really a great power. We kind of need to be prioritizing influence and soft power, which secures the UK respect and allows it to still remain relevant in the modern age.
Okay, do Sophie and Aaron want to come back to that point, or do you want to bring in another point?
There's definitely been shown to be like a growing risk at the moment, especially with the recent conflict in the Middle East. Like we can't just stop spending because we don't think it's a threat right now when it's shown to be like something that could very suddenly happen. Like to be able to defend ourselves in the face of an attack, we need to have prolonged spending to build up our armed forces. Like we can't just suddenly have an army to defend us.
And Bertie and Zach, would you like to come back to Sophie's point, or have you got a new point you'd like to raise with them?
I would just argue that in reality, the UK really isn't under threat from nations in the Middle East, such as Iran. In fact, these are just provoked by, our so-called allies, such as the US and Israel, who, have kind of attacked, for example, Iran recently, just kind of out of the blue, which is really kind of jeopardizing the UK. And we should instead be prioritizing this foreign aid and kind of diplomatic relations that are going to help us increase our soft power and make sure that we're not actually wasting money or costing British lives abroad in needless wars.
Dive back in at the other side if you've got anything to say.
I think one of the main reasons that you can say that we like aren't at threat as much is because we have such a strong defense system already. Like we have a build-up of nuclear weapons. But if we haven't put lots of defense spending into that over the years, then we're going to come across as quite weak because we wouldn't have something to back us up. But it's the fact that we've had defense spending that we're able to say that we're not like at a massive threat. But if we cut that to prioritize foreign aid, then we're just weakening ourselves.
Just a reminder to the audience, you can pose your questions in the chat. So do join in. Have the others to the side against the motion got anything else to defend their point of view with, or to challenge the other side on?
We'd like to bring up the point that if foreign aid cuts lead to instability overseas, would this not lead to further increased government expenditure on defence and more pressure on the government's budget?
So currently the main target areas of spending for international aid to the UK are sub-Saharan Africa, as previously said, for opposition, and then the war in Ukraine. However, the main area of the war in Ukraine where the funding goes to is housing war-torn migrants who are fleeing to the UK. So that isn't really deemed as international aid. That is mainly catered towards national aid. So, and with sub-Saharan Africa, if funding is cut from those areas, then they do not have nuclear weapons. They do not have a large army to raise. So we will be already at a higher power stance with our nuclear weapons. So we need that funding in defence to upkeep them and make sure our army stays up to spec.
Okay, last call for questions from the audience, and I'm just going to ask if the panelists would like to make any closing remarks while you think of those. So closing remarks for the side that's speaking in favour of the motion. So that is Sophie and Aaron. Anything final to say?
I think you also can't claim that there's any real evidence that foreign aid is actually helping with conflicts, especially in Ukraine. If we're donating a lot to Ukraine, one of the main reasons that Russia's attacking Ukraine is because they don't like how closely affiliated they are with the West. So by donating to them, we're actually worsening the situation for Ukraine.
Okay. So apparently the chat's been disabled. So if people have got questions, you could put them in the Q&A. Sorry, I'm not quite sure why the chat function's not working, but if you can pop any questions you got in the Q&A, that would be great. Thanks. And then we'll just hear from the against side. They're sort of summing up. Thank you.
I think overall it's clear that actually if you look at somewhere like Ukraine, all the money that we are spending on defense is only going to increase the risk of war as nations become more and more kind of built up and armed and kind of ready to attack. I think it's clear that the current situation there isn't really a real threat to the UK, and instead we should be trying to combat things such as poverty, poor governance, and increasing pressure from climate change to try and reduce the things that are actually the catalysts for conflict in the world.
Okay, because you need a bit, I know you hasn't had much time to put the points in the chat. We'll give a moment for you to add them to the Q&A instead. But just in the meantime, I'd like to talk quickly about how kind of this sort of thing fits in with Aspire lessons. So as I said, the main aim of Aspire is to help you get ready for what you want to do next, but we also want to develop skills that are going to help you if, say, you were invited to interview Oxford or Cambridge or for an apprenticeship, and just generally develop skills to be able to communicate your ideas better, also have kind of an understanding of events in the world. So some of the things we do, the beauty of this SMART program is that we are able to do these things because it's not a prescribed program. There's not a specification that we need to follow, is that we can respond to events in the world or just kind of develop kind of those skills in students in a way that maybe other subjects aren't able to because they have to get through the specifications. So a point that somebody has made, I think this is a point that would be I'd put to Zach and Bertie to consider. Somebody has said their most convincing point they feel against the argument is that foreign aid creates dependency. Have you got anything to come back to that argument for?
I would argue that although it's possible to create dependency, especially with, kind of corrupt places where the money could be going, in general, this money is kind of a moral good that I think, the West almost owes the rest of the world as a result of, kind of colonization, all these things that we do and exploiting that world. And I think if you can improve those lives in the world through the right means, such as, for example, building a well in a village to give clean drinking water, then that is a moral good, and I think we should strive towards that.
Thank you. This is another question also for you two, I think. Basically, you've mentioned that we don't need conventional forces because the UK is a nuclear power. But are you suggesting that nuclear weapons are going to be the answer to everything, so that we would always, like, nuclear weapons should be our kind of weapon of first resort? I don't think you are, but do you want to say something about that?
I think that building up conventional forces suggests that we're trying to take offensive action against countries, whereas in pure defense of the UK itself, which is what we should be focused on, rather than creating meaningless conflict. If, for example, Russia attacked, London itself, then I think the most obvious response would be nuclear weapons. And without that, conventional forces just seem to me to be quite an offensive tactic.
Thank you. And a good question here, and one that goes to the other side, so to even things up a bit. Is it not possible, specifically given the current Middle Eastern conflict, that an increase in defence spending could trigger a worldwide militarisation and increase in diplomatic tensions?
So in recent NATO meetings, they're currently aiming to increase the global spending by NATO in countries by around 5%. So this means, as global tensions are rising in recent times, throughout NATO, spending is going up, especially with Trump's pressure on increasing NATO countries to come to his preset standards of, I think, around 2.6% of spending. So just overall, it has been seen that, yes, the increase in global tensions has kind of had a positive correlation with spending, but it's mainly the spending is due to the increase in tensions, just so each country is individually prepared themselves.
I think this was maybe a comment rather than a question for either side, but somebody making a good point that as a moral standpoint, shouldn't we ask what would be best for other countries with aid instead of looking at how it affects us? So I don't know, that could be for any side to come back to, I think. And we got, so from, I think, Zach, you've already made a point, I think, haven't you, that morally you would agree with that point. Is that fair?
I think there's almost pros and cons for all kind of foreign aid. And, it's important to take into account that stuff like foreign aid does actually increase the UK's soft power, and it's not done from a purely moral point. But I do think that we should be focused on moral issues to develop the third world. So I do think it should primarily take a moral standpoint, but there's no denying that there is kind of soft power advantages for the UK in giving out foreign aid.
Right, okay, and two last questions before we take another poll. This is a good question. How much money can we justify spending on defence when we aren't currently in the war or considering joining the war in the Middle East? As we have many issues in our own country. So I suppose that maybe that's not quantifying and not say how much money in terms of billions of pounds, but how should we prioritise defence spending against maybe spending on other National Health Service, education, welfare, things like that. So I think because we heard from Zach just now, let's hear what Sophie or Aaron have to say about that question. So how much can we justify spending money? It's sort of slightly going away from the exact motion, I guess, which was just asking us to compare spending on foreign aid and defence. But in terms of prioritising defence spending over other spending, have you got anything to say about that?
Recently, Keir Starmer, as I previously stated, the 2.5% increase of GDP for military spending he aims to get it to 3%. He doesn't have a set date for that. He says by next Parliament, but that could be sooner or later. It really does depend on the results of the next general election. But that shows that the government does have confidence that they will be able to reach that 3% goal, hopefully without any further tax increases or any other fiscal factors.
Right, and there's one last question which I did really want to get to, so and then we might need to stop. So and we'll take another poll. So some of us do. So I think I'm going to ask Zach this question because I know that he studies modern history and might have covered this. But do you not think that foreign aid is due for countries that have been affected by neocolonialism from the UK? So as a kind of legacy of colonialism, some of them may need that foreign aid.
I do think these countries should be the primary recipients of foreign aid, especially those which have been exploited for vast amounts of natural resources and, almost still kind of are by many kind of unethical companies in Africa and whatnot. And yeah, I do think that should be the primary goal of foreign aid, but I don't think we should necessarily say, we had the British Empire, we should only give foreign aid to victims of that, instead of, say, for example, countries that maybe were in the French Empire or so on. But I do think we should just focus more on that moral standpoint and just give foreign aid where it's needed, which could be, in all kinds of countries that had all kinds of different colonial overlords.
Right, and some people have somehow been able to get into the chat now. I don't know that it's suddenly become enabled, or just some people have special powers. But I'm not going to pose these questions to the panel because I think we need to take the vote and move on. But they're really good, so I'm going to just read a couple of them out. The provision of foreign aid can also have wider impacts than simply moral. The promotion or development in sub-Saharan Africa and other deprived regions can alleviate refugee crises and in turn reduce strain for the UK and Europe in general that may materialise instead in mass immigration. Foreign aid would be an indirect response to the refugee crisis, so it wouldn't be an appropriate response. Good point. And another point directed against somebody sort of saying, are you suggesting basically that we would put our own civilians at risk by using nuclear weapons? And I think kind of just one other point I was going to bring up, which is about kind of the rise of powers such as China, USA, and Russia, and their kind of circle of influence increasing, and how would the UK be able to combat this, I think, without kind of defence spending increase. So we're not going to pose, those are good questions, but we are going to just launch the poll again now to find out if, in the light of that debate, the forwards and against the change. So just a reminder, before we had the debate, there were 59% agreeing and 41% disagreeing. And it'd be really interesting to see what people think now. So let's see where we are. It's kind of very close. Just give people a little tiny bit more time to vote. It seems to be settling around 56% agree, and 44% disagree. So it's still that the agree side have won, but the margin is slightly smaller. Yeah. Okay, I think we're cool. As we close the poll now. Yeah, so it is, so the 56% agreeing with the motion, so well done. So congratulations and to Aaron and Sophie, but it was very close, 44% disagreeing with the motion. And I think what was really interesting and well done to Bertie and Zach, that you did close in on that margin by whatever you said, did obviously persuade some people, I think, to switch sides in the debate. So I hope that you enjoyed that, and it might kind of give you a taste of kind of types of things we might do in Aspire. But now is your chance to definitely use in the Q&A this time. So forget about the chat. We will make sure that chat is disabled now. Via the Q&A to pose any questions that you've got for the panel. And sorry, I will just go back. We will try and answer as many of them as we can. So I will direct them at the person in the panel I think is most in a position to answer them, because obviously it depends a little bit about whether they've what they've studied and so on. So I know you might have questions about what people want to what you're thinking about studying. You might be thinking about whether you want to do 4 or 3 A levels. I'll answer the first question because I'm not sure the panel would necessarily know the answer. So somebody's answered whether EPQs count towards UCAS points. The straightforward answer is yes, they do. So they do get UCAS points. The more complicated but probably more useful answer is that for the most competitive universities, they don't really look at UCAS points. They're more interested in specific grades. So whereas there are some universities that will ask for a minimum number of UCAS points that you can kind of collect from different qualifications. So for instance, a distinction star at BTEC would be worth 56 UCAS points, which is the same as an A star at A level. But UCAS points for more competitive universities, they will require certain qualifications at certain levels rather than UCAS points. Somebody wanted to, sorry, but this is another one for me. Yeah, about your topic not overlapping with the subject you're studying. So you can't say you were history. Well, actually, I'm just using an example. I'm going to actually ask for Bertie's help here because we're doing geography. So Bertie, the question is about EPQ and the fact that you can't do a topic that overlaps with the subject you're studying. So give an example of a topic that's in your geography curriculum, either from the lower or upper 6th year, so like a unit that you study.
Could be the carbon cycle.
Okay, excellent. So if you were doing something about the carbon cycle and you wanted to do your geography EPQ couldn't be exactly the content of what you are covering in the carbon cycle in geography, but if you're interested in a particular kind of mitigation against kind of like climate change that isn't covered in the curriculum, you could explore that. My background is actually history, and if I use a history example, that might explain it as well. So I used to be head of history here. If you're studying Zach's course, I know we're not doing history tonight, but which is covers the British Empire, you wouldn't be able to do an EPQ about reasons for the expansion of the British Empire in the 19th century, because that is literally what you spend your first term studying in A-level history. But if you're interested in the concept of empires and how they grow, you could look at a different empire. Yeah, so like reasons for the growth of the Roman Empire or something else, but you couldn't look at the exact content in your A level. So hopefully that helps. So this is a question I'm going to throw this out for any of you, and just give you a bit of thinking time to think about what you want to say. Did the Aspire programme help you develop? I think it's probably for the upper 6. I don't know if Sophie's had time yet to kind of consider this. Did the Aspire programme help you develop your critical thinking and ability to have opinions? So were you completely opinionless when you arrived? Now you've got lots of opinions, or do you feel that kind of maybe kind of having that extra time a week and doing things, you might want to bring in pathways here as well if you've been on pathways. Any volunteers to answer that question? Or yeah, Aaron, thank you.
I mean, before the Aspire pathway, I never really
Got a bit of my muting and unmuting then. This is a good question. So I think again, probably for more of an upper sixth students, because obviously you've done this, you've been through this process. Maybe either for Zach or Bertie, has the Aspire programme made you feel more confident in applying and doing your personal statement? So maybe a bit of help about like what help you got and with your applications.
I would most definitely say yes, it did help me. For someone who's like none of their family have been to university, it was really helpful in understanding how applying to university works and like the different universities around and which kind of where they're kind of ranked and stuff. Especially as well, my personal statement. I got so much support when creating that. It did really give me that confidence to go and apply to aspirational universities.
Fantastic. Okay. It's a question about how do I apply for a specific pathway? I think this is something maybe to talk about. I could talk about the Aspire pathway is general. So in our Aspire groups, there will be people that, like in Sophie's group, there's people that want to do PPE, but there's also, I think, people that want to study everything from medicine to physics to history. So it's a general program, whatever you want to apply for. After Christmas in your lower sixth year, you'll also have the option to join a pathway. That will be more subject specific or maybe tailored to the type of university you want to apply for. So the person that's asking this question was asking about law, there's a law pathway that you can join that you do as well as your Aspire pathway. Or you could, if you're thinking about applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you could join the Oxbridge pathway. So that I've answered that question. Okay, this is a good question. This comes up a lot. I think this is probably one for Sophie because it's probably fresher in her memory. How has it felt joining Reigate, and was it a major jump up from GCSEs?
I think they definitely kind of introduce you in gradually. Like the first few weeks, we were mostly just doing intro stuff and stuff like that. And then for maths as well, like we just recap GCSE content. And I think from doing like a third maths GCSE, that was really helpful for maths A level because it's like half of the first year course. But they really just gradually let you into it.
And just a bit about how was it like in terms of like obviously at school you're very much in school from 8:30 to 3:30 or whatever times, and now you've got lots of chance to manage your own time. How have you coped with that kind of requirement to be more organised and self-motivated?
Yeah, it's good. I have quite a few free periods to like get my work done and stuff like that. And you also do have a lot more freedom to like just go out with your friends during the day, which is quite nice. But I think especially doing 4A levels, you just kind of need to like sometimes get your work done and stuff like that. But you definitely do have time to get everything done.
Okay, fantastic. This is a good question, I think, for Bertie. So I'm not sure whether I want to go to university after college. Is this Aspire programme still a good option for me? So maybe talk a bit about kind of like what decisions you've made during the course of your time.
I would say yes, the Aspire program is definitely still worth doing. I initially did want to go to university, then changed my mind, and then changed my mind again. But it's really nice just to like have that understanding in the first place, so that even if you do get to your second year and you're like, okay, I want to go, but maybe I want to have a gap year, take a bit of time off, then you still have that understanding and that foundation to then apply in your gap year. You're not just on your own. So if you're unsure, I definitely say yes, because at the end of the day, then it's only an hour extra a week. It's really not a big deal. It's not going to be a huge part of your timetable. So I would definitely say it's worth taking if you're unsure.
And I'd also say that actually what you'll find, you are quite busy at college, and if you don't have that time set aside each week to really think about what you want to do in the future, you can suddenly get to the point where you actually need to apply and not really have thought about it and make decisions that are not as well informed as they could be. So it does give you that time in the week to think about whether you want to go down, which routes you want to go down. And we do talk about degree apprenticeship routes as well. Now, this question is about workload for A levels. So a question maybe for, again, I think it's early for Sophie, maybe a question particularly for Aaron. So Aaron's doing 4 A levels. Zach is actually doing 3 A levels and a BTEC in music production. But if we ask Aaron, it's specifically for somebody who's thinking that their 4th A level would be a native language. I would say that about studying an A level as a native language, I'm sure you're aware that a lot of the studying that you do is about literature, films, and so on in the native language. So even if it's your native language, it's a bit like kind of an English person studying English literature, English spoken, somebody whose first language is English studying English literature. It's still a lot of work. But just like, I mean, we haven't got anybody that I don't can speak to doing a native language as their 4th A level, but just in terms of workload generally with 4 A levels, could you say something about that, Aaron?
So with 4 A levels, if you initially start off with 4 A levels, you will just naturally get used to the workload of 4 A levels because you won't actually know, okay, how's workload on 3? You only know the workload on 4. From my side, because I do further maths on my 4th A level, it's not like I'm doing a whole nother subject. So personally for me, the workload hasn't been too bad. But if you are thinking of doing a subject that doesn't correlate with any of your other A levels, such as a language, maybe like doing history, geography on top of the stuff I do already, that may be larger workload. In addition to EPQ, that may become unmanageable at some points. But like if you feel like you can handle the workload, say if you do a lot of GCSEs right now and you have got the mindset and you've got the schedule to fit in that study time, then just give your best shot.
Thank you. Okay, another question that sort of relates to workload a bit, I think. So whether you believe that Aspire program has affected your other A levels. So I think probably if you're just doing Aspire and you're not doing EPQ, I think it's unlikely to do this. It's 1 hour a week. And although I might set a little bit of work, I could go away and think about this debate we're having next week. It's not particularly demanding. But maybe I'll ask Bertie, how do you manage the workload of doing your EPQ alongside your other A levels?
Personally, I didn't really find that my EPQ or my work in Aspire particularly conflicted with my other subjects. I found that it worked out quite nicely once the progression exams were done in the first year. We entered the summer term. That's when my work for Aspire kind of ramped up, but that was okay because I didn't have any big tests to be preparing for, so it actually worked out really well. And at that point, I could afford to dedicate a lot extra time to my EPQ, which is when it was needed. So I wouldn't say, no, it took up too much time.
Thank you. Good question about the other pathways. So we could have a whole separate applicants event on the other pathways, but I'll just explain briefly. So when you join college, you choose the Aspire pathway. We talk about that at interview, but you also get a survey about which other pathway you would like to do starting in January. And you make a preference. However, we know that by the time you actually start that pathway in January, you might have changed your mind. So you have a chance in November to choose a different pathway. So there are about 29 pathways, so I won't list them all. But for instance, we have law, we have psychology, we have ones that are, so we have subject-specific ones, but we also have ones that we have the Oxford pathway that actually maybe Sophie could talk about briefly because you've joined that one. You choose them initially when you join, but you have the chance to change your mind and join a different one later on in case you've obviously you might not have known what you wanted to do when you first signed up. So Sophie's I think we've only had 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 3 weeks of the Oxford pathway. So I said they start towards the end of January after exams have various things have happened after Christmas. So maybe just say a little bit about what we've done so far in the Oxford pathway.
We've kind of just been looking at like what subjects we want to apply to and just like different opportunities that universities offer, like open days and things like that. Just kind of like exploring our possible subjects.
Okay, yeah. So and then They actually, Zach, I don't know that Zach's is actually holding an offer from Cambridge. He was part of the Oxbridge pathway in the lower sixth and in a tutor group in the upper sixth. You want to say anything about kind of the support you had with your application while we're talking about Oxbridge?
The pathways, especially the Oxbridge pathway, but also Aspire as well, really helped me decide that I did want to apply to Cambridge, and the level support, especially in the Oxbridge pathway, which you can also continue into the upper sixth year, really helped me do my personal statement and prepare for interview and just in general develop my confidence with just speaking and also reasoning, which is a big thing that's really going to help you in the interview. And it also really helped me kind of develop arguments to put on my personal statement and whatnot, because for Oxbridge, they want to see that kind of level of thinking, which is what Oxbridge and Aspire really, really helps with.
That's it. So a couple of questions I will answer. So someone says, if you choose between two A levels, should you choose the one you like most or the one you're better at? So I don't know, when you were choosing your A levels, I know it's a while ago for three of you, were you in that situation where there were two that you would more A levels that you'd have liked to take than you could take? And how did you go about making that choice? And did you prioritize ones that you knew you'd be good at or ones that you enjoyed more? I mean, I know what my answer is, but I will see what you guys think. Who'd like to volunteer to answer that one? Yep, Zach.
So for me, the obvious answer would definitely be to choose an A level that you really do enjoy and like and genuinely have a passion for, because that's really going to help you, especially once you get to university and you're thinking about what you want to study. You know, you really want to study something that interests you and excites you. And also just with the A level itself, if you have a genuine interest in the subject, that's really going to help you actually excel there, because A levels is a lot of content. It's a lot more critical thinking, a lot more kind of exam skills are needed. And if you really enjoy your subjects and you know kind of all your examples and whatnot, say for politics, you're going to be better at kind of deploying that and finding out more about the subject. And you're going to have that eagerness to learn that's actually going to help you probably in the long term excel far more than just taking a subject that you think you're good at.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I would have said as well. I think you need to be good at something to take it, because that's why we have minimum entrance requirements for A levels. So you have to have like been good enough to get a certain GCSE grade, but then it needs to be, yeah, what you're going to enjoy doing, as Zach said. Somebody asked a specific question about whether language would work well with geography and sociology. That sounds like a great combination of subjects, but obviously without knowing what it is you want to do in the future, I mean, that wouldn't be a great combination of subjects if you want to go on and be a medic, for instance, because you don't have biology and chemistry. So I wouldn't want to advise on that specific combination. But I would suggest when you come to introductory day, you get the opportunity to try out taste lessons in different subjects. And those are three subjects that you could certainly try out. I can quickly answer, if the workload is, if an EPQ is too much, can you stop doing it? Yes, we'd encourage you to obviously give it your best shot. But if it's jeopardizing your chance of getting really good grades in your other subjects, it might be a good idea to drop it and not submit something that's not going to get a good grade. We have a new way of monitoring. This is another question, EPQ progress, that is new. Sophie won't be aware of it because she's not taken EPQ, and these guys won't be aware of it because they are in the upper sixth. But for this year, we've introduced something called Project Q. So EPQs have always been monitored, but the way we monitor them is much more streamlined and efficient now with something called Project Q. So you get feedback all the way along. What I would say though, if there are any, particularly if there are any parents on the call, the whole point of the EPQ is that you learn to be an independent, like study independently. So where if students don't complete structured learning in a subject or homework in a subject, parents are communicated with about that. We wouldn't necessarily be kind of emailing home and saying somebody hasn't submitted a draft of their introduction for their EPQ, because by doing that, we would automatically, they'd score 0 for AO1, assessment objective 1, which is all about their planning and ability to plan their time and manage themselves. So it's a little bit different in that way in terms of monitoring, but it is monitored. It uses something called Project Q. It also has been monitored, but it's monitored, I would say, more efficiently now. You can, in terms of like pathways, someone's asking if you can only choose one pathway. You can do Aspire and one other, but we do need to obviously put a limit to the number that you could take, because otherwise you would have to do you do lots and lots. We don't have a Greek A level, but there is like an entry level qualification in ancient Greek that you can do. That was a question I can answer. In law, we have some external people, that speakers that come in, a barrister that comes in and does a mock trial event. That's something that law students can go along to. You do have to, you don't send the EPQ to somebody else, do you send an EPQ to your chosen university? The universities you're applying to will obviously know the grade that you've got for your EPQ, but you don't send it to them. You do, however, do a presentation at the end of your EPQ that is part of the assessment. So you have to give a presentation on your EPQ as an oral presentation, stand up and deliver a presentation on your EPQ to the rest of your class and your supervisor. That is marked as part of the final mark for the EPQ. It's one of the really good things about the qualification, because it does make it a quite AI-proof qualification, because obviously if you had used AI, it would be very hard for you to stand up and answer questions and defend your project. So just ask a specific question, about the type of kind of thing you could do for a history-based EPQ. Certainly, as a good example of something like the Balkan War is, I assume, well, there have been several Balkans, but the Balkan War certainly, especially now we don't do the Cold War course, is not something that is covered. That sounds like it'd be something that would be good to cover. So as long as it's not, it can be part of history, but not part that's covered in the specification. So it's been quite a mammoth kind of like lots of really good questions, and I think we've been quite successful between us answering them, hopefully. I won't take any more questions from the audience now, because we need to start wrapping up. I would say, though, that if you've got any questions after this evening, there are contact details at the end. So, as we have said, choose what you are good at and will enjoy. So both good at and enjoy. Research your courses, particularly if you're thinking about doing something new that you don't study at GCSE. So, if it's economics or politics, obviously most of you will have studied geography GCSE, or don't have to study geography GCSE, study A level. Most of you probably will have done. But a new subject like economics or politics, it's really important you research it. So look at all the information we have online and attend the taster sessions on introductory day. Now, when I was saying earlier, I couldn't answer a question about that particular combination of questions because it depended what you want to study. There's a really good website called Informed Choices, and there's a QR code for it there that is put together by the Russell Group universities to help students in your position in year 11 make decisions about which A levels would be best, depending on what they wanted to go on and study. If you know there's a particular degree you want to study, you can choose that degree, and the website will say which subjects are essential for you to have. Okay, so if it was engineering that you ought to go and study, let's say physics. If it was, they would give you an example, and which would be desirable, like a good idea to have. And it also has the option, if you don't know what you want to study, suggests like kind of possible subject combinations. So Informed Choices, if you don't get to scan that QR code, if you just Google Informed Choices Russell Group, you'll get to that website. It's really useful. Okay, so what next? So I know you haven't got very long left now. You're probably in the midst of GCSE mocks and things like that. Do work hard to get the best grades you can. Look out for Aspire. We're not actually doing new starters activities, but there'll be more information about Aspire on the website. And start exploring your subjects. There's lots of ideas on the next slide where you could do that. So this is a slide that'll be familiar to Aspire students, and you probably already know about things like TED Talks. But there's a great website called The Conversation. It's up in the top right-hand corner there, which is basically news articles, but they're written by academics. Some sort of raw, and of course, things you might be less familiar with, like FutureLearn, which is a platform for online learning courses that you can take part in. But yeah, if you have time, once you finish your GCSEs, you will have a long summer break. Do start to kind of think what you could do to explore subjects that you're thinking about studying. Even to start perhaps thinking about possible EPQ titles you might like to explore. Okay, so as I said, good luck with your GCSEs. If you've got any questions, then you can email us. I should put the Aspire email address up there, but the email address for Aspire, as with most email addresses at Aspire, is aspire@reigate.ac.uk. So all things to do with Reigate. So you'll notice that Reigate email addresses are always somebody.somebody@reigate.ac.uk. So in the case of Aspire, just aspire@reigate.ac.uk. And please, before you log out of this webinar, please can you complete our short online survey, feedback survey, which I think we're just about to launch. It will launch when it ends. Sorry, so when we finish the webinar, there will be a short survey for you to complete. So I would just like to, I'm not sure Amal Rajan says at the end of University Challenge, he says, they'd like that everybody gets to wave goodbye. That's a reference to University Challenge if you've watched it. Anyway, well done, very well done. Thank you very much to our panelists. It's a great pleasure having had them with us and hope it was useful for you to hear from them. So thank you very much and thank you for attending and good luck with your GCSEs.